Facebook reckons I have got 513 friends, but let's face it, Facebook is lying because, as everyone knows, online friends are not real friends at all, are they? In fact, the vast majority of my Facebook friends are merely what you'd call acquaintances. Some of them I've only met once. A lot of them, I haven't even spoken to them, let alone seen them, for well over 15 years. So I wonder, how many friends do we really have? How many friends do you really have? What makes someone a friend? What's the acid test? And it's something I've been thinking about a little bit this week. What separates a Facebook friend from a real friend? And I think one word can sum it up, and I think that word is action. Look at your friends, however many you think you've got, and how many are willing to get off their sofa and do something personally for you. Something that's going to cost them. I think the airport test is an interesting one for gauging your friends. Which of your friends would drive you to or pick you up from the airport? And it's a good test because airport trips are a hassle, aren't they? It's normally a good hour to the nearest airport. And often you've got to get up really early because someone's flight is at 10, but you've got to get there 3 hours before. So that's 7. You've probably get up at 5:30 to go and pick them up. So that's awkward. And airports are always busy. So even if you get there at 7 in the morning, there's a load of cars there, there's 100 signs to follow. And of course, it costs a bomb to park. So picking someone up from the airport or taking them to there is a sacrifice. A lot of people claim to be your friend, but who would do that for you? When push comes to shove, what one of your friends is willing to sacrifice anything for you? That's what your best friend will do for you, isn't it? They'll stick with you when the going gets tough. They'll be loyal to you even when it costs them. Well, this morning, we're going to see Jesus forsaken by his friends. We got a pretty long passage, as you saw, so we're going to deal with it in broad brushstrokes. And that means some of the bits you'll think, oh, you didn't mention that. Don't worry, we'll get to that probably next week. So, first point, Jesus is forsaken by the rest of the 12. So, remember last time Jesus and his friends had enjoyed a Passover meal within Jerusalem, and he's declared that he is the real Passover lamb. And verse 26, look what it says. When they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. We've all got our favourite place to hang out, haven't we? So when Keely and I go into London, we usually head for the same spot around Blackfriars and Waterloo, because it's where my school was, it's where I hung out as a teenager. So you're familiar with it, you know what's round there, you know you're going to have a good time. Well, Jesus has his favourite spot in Jerusalem, and it was a little beauty spot on the Mount of Olives. And so he goes there with the intention of praying. By this point, Judas has left the group, and he's put his wicked scheme into action. So here he's there with the rest of the 12, the 11. But Jesus knows precisely how the rest of them will act when Judas arrives. So look what he says, verse 27. He said to them, "You will all fall away, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered. But after I'm raised up, I'll go before you to Galilee." So Jesus knows that he's going to be forsaken, that is abandoned. He's going to be left completely alone with no one backing him up. And here he quotes Zechariah chapter 13, verse 7, where it says, "Strike the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered." Jesus is going to be reduced to the status of a disgraced celebrity, isn't he? So think about what we've seen over the last few years. We've got a long list of celebrities who've been exposed for sexual misconduct. So, Prince Andrew, Sean Diddy Coombs, Harvey Weinstein, Hugh Edwards, Noel Clarke. What happens when the truth about these men finally comes out? Well, they're quickly dropped, aren't they? The corporations associated with them have dumped them. We don't want their name associated with our corporation. So they get cancelled, they get humiliated, they get shamed. They get forsaken, fired from whatever series they happen to be involved with, whatever show they were in. They're left alone to fend for themselves. And you've got to say, in those cases, quite rightly so. But not so with the Son of God's. Not so with the Good Shepherd. When the king is tried in just a few hours' time, he'll have no one to speak up for him in his defence. Not one of his friends will stand as a character witness for him. Think about that. All of his friends would forsake him. No one's stepping in, no one's stepping up for him. And Jesus hasn't been found out by the Me Too movement. There's no skeletons in his cupboard. There's no moral justification for abandoning Jesus, is there? In fact, the complete opposite is true. This man has done more good, he's shown more love, and changed more lives than any other person in history. If anyone deserved to be vindicated and supported, it was Jesus. And yet, Psalm 69, he declares through his Spirit, I am a stranger to my brethren and an alien to my mother's children. In other words, my friends and my family will forsake me. And Jesus knows it. And look at verse 31. But Peter said emphatically, if I must die with you, I will not deny you. And they all said the same. At this stage, not one of the 11 can contemplate leaving Jesus. They're all so confident of their strength and their bravery. But Jesus knows them better than they know themselves. He knows that they are merely sheep. And sure enough, when the soldiers surround them in the garden, and when Jesus refuses to put up a fight, verse 50 tells us, they all left him and fled. They leg it in fear of their lives. They desert their friend. Just as Jesus and Zechariah, the prophet, had said they would. And look at verse 51. A young man followed him with nothing but a linen cloth about his body. And they seized him, but he left the linen cloth and ran away naked. Now, it's widely accepted that this little entry is about Mark himself, the guy who wrote the gospel. This is the only gospel it appears in, so it's like Mark's putting a little bit of, look, I was there, I saw this. This is an eyewitness account. At the time, Mark was probably in his late teens, but even he has to admit that when the threat level against Jesus got too high, he made a quick exit. And not just a quick exit, it was a shameful exit, wasn't it? This young man, whether he's Mark or not, embarrasses himself. He's so keen to put distance between himself and Jesus that he is willing to head home completely starkers. Remember, at this time, Jerusalem was packed, so there would have been people around. He'd have to run past people naked to get home. He'd rather be publicly shamed than associate with Jesus. All of his followers, his best mates, the sons of thunder, all of them, even down to the YTS boy, little Mark, they leg it. He's forsaken by the 12, by the rest of the 12. Second point, let's drill down a little bit more. He is denied by the best of the 12. Peter was the leader of the disciples, arguably Jesus' best and closest friend next to John. But don't imagine Peter as a kind of Jacob Rees-Mogg, softly, gently kind of guy. He wasn't. Peter, if he was around today, he'd be considered a proper geezer, right? Today he's the sort of bloke who'd have tattoos all over him, a thick neck. He was a rugged, muscular fisherman. You've seen fishermen, right? You don't mess around with them, right? You don't pick fights. They can beat you up. In John's gospel, Jesus points this out to Peter. He says to him at one point, look, at the moment, Peter, you're strong. You can do what you want. You can go where you like. At the moment, you're a unit. But one day you won't be. One day they'll lead you where you don't want to go. So Peter here is a big, confident presence. That's what he looks like. He's a second in command. He is the muscle. And Peter's not shy in making his presence known, is he? Verse 29, he's the first to object when Jesus tells him what's going to happen. He says, even though they all fall away, I won't. Peter can imagine the others legging it. I mean, Matthew, he's a tax collector. He's an accountant, isn't he? He's a bit weak. Nathaniel, he's a bit emotional. He's a thinker. He likes praying under trees. But me, Lord, no. I'm no pushover. I'm a bloke. But Jesus knows what's coming. Verse 30, Jesus said to him, truly I tell you, this very night, before the cock crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. Jesus says to him, you won't just hide from the truth. You'll emphatically and publicly distance yourself from me. And you'll do it 3 times before the sun even comes up. Verse 31, he said emphatically, if I must die with you, I will not deny you. Poor old Peter. He is so confident of his own strength, so disbelieving of Jesus' words. But in the very next scene, Peter's weakness is exposed. Peter, James and John, they're like Jesus' bodyguards. He tells them in verse 34, remain here and watch. So be on the lookout, right? Keep an eye out for potential threats, for enemies. Be my point men, be my watchmen. But what happens? Well, as Jesus goes off to pray, the bouncers drift off to sleep. In verse 37, who does Jesus hold responsible? Well, it's Peter, isn't it? He came and found them sleeping, and he said to Peter, you're the leader, you're the biggest. Simon, why are you sleeping? Could you not watch 1 hour? Watch and pray that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. Look, Peter, you know I'm in danger. Stay awake. If there's going to be an attempt on my life, it's going to be now. So I need you to be the leader. I need you to be on top of your game. Keep watch for danger, and as you do so, be praying. Verse 39, again, he went away and prayed, saying the same words. Again, he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were very heavy, and they did not know what to answer him. They're embarrassed, aren't they? At Jesus' time of greatest need, his friends aren't able to make sacrifices for him, either physically or spiritually. They're weak. But the worst thing about it is Peter thinks he's so strong. He's got himself so wrong. Verse 41, he came the 3rd time and said to them, are you still sleeping and taking your rest? It is enough. The hour has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand. Why is it that Judas and his entourage from the temple, the guards, the Roman soldiers, how is it they're able to get the drop on Jesus? Well, it's the fault of his head of security, isn't it? It's Peter. It's his fault. If Peter had been awake, he would have heard the clinking of armour and the noise and the 50 or so people coming towards them, and maybe they could have legged it or could have discreetly travelled away. But instead, where was Peter? He was snoring. The very best and strongest of the 12 is undone by the most basic of human needs. He needs to take a nap. So the bloodthirsty crowd with their clubs and their swords are able to surround a lot of them. Peter tries to redeem himself. Look at verse 46. They laid hands on him and seized him, but one of those who stood by drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. John tells us in his gospel that this was Peter. Now Peter's feeling guilty, isn't he? So he thinks to himself, well, look, we can fight our way out of this. And he clips off someone's ear. Jesus tells him to stop it. We're outnumbered. This is not how we're going to die. Look back, though, at verse 42. And notice Jesus' words. He says, rise, let us be going. Jesus doesn't say, let me go, or off I go. He words it as if he expects his disciples to face the music with him. Let us go. Let's go and stand shoulder to shoulder in the dock. Let's be sentenced together. But verse 50, they all left him and fled. Peter, James, John, they're on their heels, they're shadows in the night. But of course, Peter's story is far from finished in Mark 14, isn't it? We've got the famous scene outside of the high priest's palace. Peter follows Jesus from a distance and he wanders into the courtyard. Verse 54, he's now standing with some of the very guards who've just arrested his mate. And then in verse 66 to 72, he is undone by a teenage girl and a chicken. The teenage girl says, I saw you during the week with that Nazarene Jesus. And verse 68, it's embarrassing. Peter plays the Jesus who card. He says, I don't know what you're talking about. Who is this Nazarene bloke? I don't know him. In fact, I can't even understand what you're saying. I don't know what you mean. It would be like someone these days pretending they didn't know who Donald Trump was, right? Jesus has been all over the news. He is the talk of the town. Peter makes his excuses. He walks a little distance and the cock crows, but he doesn't notice. But then the annoying teenager follows him. And she says, no, it's definitely you, the big fella, I remember. You're one of his bodyguards, aren't you? And she calls some of the guards over for a second opinion. But the more Peter protests, the more certain they become. And he's even got the same accent as the criminal. Oh, he's a northerner, he's a Galilean. And then strong, dependable, reliable Peter, the best of the 12, the best disciple Jesus has, he actually starts to swear and curse and completely disown his rabbi. Verse 71, he began to invoke a curse on himself and to swear, I do not know this man of whom you speak. And immediately the cock crowed a second time. And Peter remembered how Jesus had said to him, before the cock crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. And he broke down and wept. We can't even begin to imagine how gutted Peter must have felt about himself, can we? God used a chicken to show him what a chicken he was. Big, strong Peter had been pushed around by a teenage girl. Fear and panic will do that to a person, won't it? Self-preservation can make people say and do some terrible things. Okay, we've seen Jesus betrayed by one of the 12 last week. Then he's forsaken by the rest of the 12. Now he's been denied by the best of the 12, left alone. And he's been handed into the claws of the religious elite and the Roman Empire. Those are our 2 points. What does Mark want us to take away from all of this, though? Is this the part of the sermon where I make everyone feel a bit guilty for all the times where we failed to stick up for Jesus? Is it where I tell you we all need to learn to be better friends? Don't do what they did. Is that the message? Well, no, it's not, I don't think. Incidentally, it's widely accepted that after Jesus was resurrected, 10 of these 11 apostles were martyred. They would eventually pay the ultimate price for their Saviour and King. The time was coming when they wouldn't run away. So the lesson is not look at what happened. The lesson comes when we ask why this had to happen. Why did Jesus have to be abandoned by his friends? Why couldn't Peter and John be crucified right next to him? God the Father could have given Peter a bit of extra courage, couldn't he? Peter could have died next to his friend. But God in his wisdom chose the lonely path for his son to take. Why? Well, the answer's quite chilling. And it's this: there is no lonelier place in the universe than hell. And that's where Jesus was heading, wasn't it? In just a few hours' time. He was going to the loneliness and the darkness of the cross. And on the cross, as he hung there, Jesus would endure the bitter loneliness that you and I deserve. He cries out, doesn't he? My God, why have you forsaken me? Why have you abandoned me? Why have you left me alone? He's forsaken, he's publicly shamed, he's left by everybody. I've lost count of how many times I've heard people tell me when I'm doing the open air, I don't mind going to hell because all my mates are going to be there. Right? Now, however wrong that statement might be, it proves one thing. People value their friendships. They think that even an inhospitable place like hell, where they probably imagine fires and pitchforks and cages and little devils running around, they think even if it's bad, it'll be bearable if Darryl and the boys from the pub are down there with me. But of course, the horrifying reality is that hell is not like that at all. It is not a cartoon place. Hell is solitary confinement forever. Dark, lonely, where the only sound people can hear are their own groans and the grinding of their own teeth. Think about your best friend. I talked about that earlier. Why do you love them? Well, you love them because of their godlike characteristics, don't you? Because of their kindness, their gentleness, their generosity, their beauty, their good humour, their loyalty. You love your best friend because they bear the image of God. We're attracted to each other. We want to make friends with each other because God is attractive. But in hell, every trace of God's blessing and goodness is stripped away. And that includes the joy and happiness that people get from spending time with one another. And the thing is, Christian friend, that is what you and I deserve. Because of our sin, because of our rejection of God's, what we should get is an eternity without any trace of God's. Without any of his image bearers with whom we can even spend time. That's the chilling lesson we need to learn this morning. We deserve solitary confinement. Let's close on a positive though. Let's end with some good news. I asked at the start, what makes a good friend? What is the acid test? What separates a Facebook friend from a real friend? Well, it's action, isn't it? A friend's love manifests itself in action. And is there any action more friendly than this? The perfect Son of God's dying like a scummy criminal on behalf of his friends. This makes Jesus the perfect example of a friend, doesn't it? Remember what he says in John 15. He says this: "This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends." Jesus endured solitary confinement on the cross so that we could enjoy perfect relationships, not only with God, but with his image bearers. That's what a church is. We're enjoying relationships with God, through God's. And yet Jesus had to endure what we deserved. Ditched by all his mates. Betrayed by one of the 12. Forsaken by the rest and denied by the best. The things he went through on this night, he went through for us. And look, here's a truth to get you through this week. Because of the work of our dear Saviour, we're now friends with the Most High gods. I know a guy, he's a bit of a name dropper. So he says, oh, I know Clive, yes, they're a friend. I did this with him and I did that with him. As if knowing Clive for 10 minutes in the late noughties was something to be immensely proud of. Christian friend, recognise the position you're in. You get to name drop the biggest name of all. The God who created heaven and earth and everything in it, he says, yeah, I know Steve Whitten. He's my friend. And I love him and I'll do anything for him. In fact, I've already done everything for him. God has died on a cross for me and for you, if you're his people. And after that, he's showered us with every spiritual blessing now and everlasting life in the ages to come. This is what our friend Jesus has won for everyone who's put their faith in him. And now I get to say, God, yeah, I know him. He's my father, he's my friend. And he's my friend because I know his son. And he's adopted me into his family. I'll close with the words of Jesus from John 12:14. He says this, you are my friends if you do what I command you. No longer do I call you servants, for a servant does not understand what his master is doing. But I've called you my friends because everything I've learned from my Father, I've made known to you. Praise the God of heaven, who's made himself known through his Son, the King. Betrayed for us, forsaken for us, denied for us, slain for us, but risen victorious for us, so that we can call him friends.